We have to reach a point where we kind of divorce ourselves.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Sometimes I just like to come outside and watch these planes coming in. And as I watch the planes, you know, I remember a time that I experienced some delays while traveling. It was recently, actually, around 2 months ago, July 19 to be exact. It was a Friday, and I'm sure many people would remember that day as being the day when they had that Microsoft cyber attack, when several of the computers weren't working in hospitals, in airports, you know, other government places, not just in the US, but also in other countries. It was actually an international thing. So, you know, lo and behold, I was traveling that day. So how the story began was I had an early flight. You know, I was coming from where I was coming from. The city that I was working was several hours away from the airport. So my flight was early in the morning, as I said. So I left out, you know, way like 2 o'clock in the morning or something crazy. And I was driving down all morning, listening to the music on the radio. Didn't know what was going on, but when I got to the airport, it was clear that there was something going on. You know, it was definitely not business as usual, for sure. So I went up to the guy and I was like, at the airport, the Delta agent, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he looked at me strange. You know, like, where have you been? You know, didn't you hear that there is this big cyber attack that went on this morning and a lot of the computers aren't working? And I noticed when I was looking around, you know, all the monitors that I could see, they were blue screen. You know, and they were not working, and the airport was crazy. As I said, I've never seen it like that. It's not usually such a super busy airport. Anyways, I got in line. Everything was going slowly, manually for the most part, and finally got my bag checked in, went through security. Everything was just slow. Hurry up and wait. You know, it was just a long day. And I saw that my flight was delayed from, it's supposed to be around, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning. I had to keep on delaying. Every time I check the monitor or check my phone or whatever, you'll notice that the time was pushing back by an hour, by 2 hours, and eventually it said 5:30, and it kind of stayed there for a while. So I figured it was going to more or less be 5:30. Most of that time I spent in the lounge in the airport, and I was able to stay there, you know, get some stuff done, get some food. My card wasn't working because a lot of the machines were also not working that day, unfortunately. But luckily, with the lounge access, I was able to get into the lounge because of the membership that I had, and that sorted out. So that was good. Otherwise, it would have been difficult because I didn't have any cash on me to buy anything. So at 5:30, I went to the gate. A lot of people were there. People were happy. I know that things were happening because I saw that the plane was at the gate. Anyways, we got on the flight. Everything was going good. Everybody was, you know, seatbelt on, ready to take off. The pilot came out and said, "Hey, we're not gonna be flying out again tonight. Please, deplane. I can't give you any more information at this time. Please go and speak to the customer service representative." So I'm at the back of the plane, right? So by the time I came out, it was a ridiculously long line because it was a full flight, and I was at the back, so people in front of me were getting through, and I think they were trying to get people rescheduled to different flights because a lot of people had connecting flights to other places, you know, international flights, so forth. By the time I got up there, the lady was unable to help me to get on a flight for that night, so she was like, you know, we're going to rebook you for the first flight in the morning, and here's a $20 gift card to go get some food. So I was like, man, what am I going to do now? Because, you know, this was around 6:37 in the night. And I'm like, I don't want to stay in the airport all night. So I started to look for nearby hotels, but everything was booked out because a lot of people, flights were canceled from the entire day. You know, and people were booking the hotels to stay overnight. So I called my company travel agency, and they were very helpful. So they were able to find me somewhere a little bit out from the airport, but luckily it was still, you know, in the same city. So I spent the night there. Fast forward, the next morning, it was an early flight, earlier than usual. I think they actually made that flight just for people who were delayed the day before. So I got to the airport pretty early, and you know, we went through. Same thing happened. The flight was delayed. No, they were able to tell us that it wasn't a system error this time because computers were working, but they were like, oh, the pilots that were supposed to fly this plane, they couldn't find anywhere to stay in Pittsburgh that night, so they had to send them to West Virginia, which is the next state across the border. So they went to West Virginia, they stayed there, and they were coming on an Uber, but they're running late. So, that's another wait again. So eventually they came, we boarded the flight, and we got to our destination finally. And that experience, I wasn't overwhelmed. I didn't feel stressed or anything. I was just very tired because I was just coming from several hours of working several days in a row without any day off. So, but I didn't have a next flight to catch the next day. I didn't have anything to really do. So I was just like, I just want to get through this process. And I was grateful that even though the computers were down, I was still able to communicate with my family, with my friends, to let them know what was going on. And I wasn't totally just cut off. But there are several lessons that I learned, and those things that I kind of reinforced, because things that I knew before, you need to always have cash on you, because when there's a crisis, cash become king, right? And I know that, I know that. But for whatever reason, I didn't have any cash on me that day. I looked everywhere, couldn't find any cash on me. ATM machines weren't working, so I wasn't able to get access to any cash. So that's an important lesson that we should always, the computers work. When the computers work, everything is great. But when they don't work, it's chaos, because things get really slow, because we're so dependent on technology. We're so dependent on computer and AI and all these things, that when something strange happens to this internet or to the database, then we are pretty much clueless as to what's going on. We can't do nothing. All right. So we have to reach a point where we kind of divorce ourselves from all these computer things at some point. I mean, as I said, they're very helpful. Don't get me wrong. When they work, things go great. But once they're not working, it becomes it's so systematic. It's right across the board. Everything is connected to the internet. Everything is connected to the computer. So that was definitely an eye opener for me. So I always have cash on hand, not only when you're traveling, but in general. I always have some emergency cash. It goes back to even the COVID pandemic, when people, they were trying to say, hey, cash is dirty, blah, blah, blah. But listen, it's also important to always have cash. You never know. You never know. The other thing that I learned is that, the world is so connected, because one thing happening over this side of the world, I heard that it was also affecting people in India, although, different countries. I can't remember all the other countries that were involved with this situation. So the world is such a connected place that you can't say that, oh, I'm in America, I'm in Jamaica, whatever. What's happening in Africa doesn't affect me. Nope. And we see, again, going back to the pandemic, it started out in China, and then it eventually affected the entire world, just because of how global the world is. Either way, these crises and these little things are just going to continue to get worse. They're going to become more frequent, and we have to get to a place where we are able to survive off the system, independent of the system, because we know that as the second coming of Jesus Christ becomes closer, we're going to go through more and more persecution, and it's not going to be a situation where it's going to affect everybody equally, right? So we know that if you decided that you're not going to take the mark of the beast, for example, then you will be cut off, and you're going to see people be able to travel, be able to buy food, and you're not able to do any of those things. So what are you going to do in that time? You're going to have your own system of economy, so to speak, the Eden economy, where you go back to planting your own food, you go back to bartering and stuff like that, and try to survive, because if you refuse to take their mark, then you won't be able to take part in the economy. So hope everybody is having a blessed day, and that was just a recent experience of mine. And another thing too, I never ever like to travel on a Sabbath or a Friday. So, and that was a Friday, and I ended up having to travel on a Sabbath, which is the next day. So that was also something that I never usually like travel on a Friday or any day close to the Sabbath, because I know that Friday or Saturday, because I know things can happen, and I really don't like to be out like that on the Sabbath day. So that's another thing that went wrong on that trip with me, but it all worked out, and I'm grateful that it's in the rear view. But I know that these things will continue to happen, and we have to prepare ourselves for it, and worse is coming.